Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Josh. So today's topic is payroll common problems. Basically, as I was developing this event today, um, we're trying to, what we're talking about are things that we hear in our support calls, on our support calls that seem to come up a lot, time and time again, from our Church Windows customers and particularly payroll customers and users, where we see that there are things that are really helpful and avoidable for helping minimize your problems. Okay. So let's dive into payroll and before we do that, hang on. So first and foremost on my list here of things is, folks, backups. Keep current backups. This is true for all portions of Church Windows, not just payroll, okay? So, and I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're a desktop user, cloud user, anyone can back up their data at any time. So if you're making a broad change to the database, or if you're unsure about something that you're doing in the database, give yourself that restore point to go back to by simply going to administration, backup, and make a data backup, okay? I think we had a customer last week, I think, that I heard on a support call who, and unfortunately, folks, we still get this call, is they call us, they say the computer crashed, we had to get a new computer, and we say, okay, great, we can reinstall Church Windows, the program, but where's your data backup? And they say, what backup? Okay. Church Windows customers are responsible for backing up their own data. Church Windows does not back up the database on its own. That is each user's responsibility to ensure that their data is backed up. So please make sure that that's being done. Okay. Like I said, it's under administration, backup. You can choose the location where to back it up. It defaults to all data, and you simply click begin backup, and it just creates that backup. And I've got right here on my desktop here, over here, let me drag that kind of right up here at the very top. Let me get out my drawing tool. Right here, it's called CW Data Backup with a date and a timestamp on it, okay? And so if I were to go in and make another backup, 5 minutes later, it would create a new backup with a new date and timestamp on it, okay? So make sure that you are cleaning, making sure that that data is backed up and protected, folks, okay? That's the prize. The software can be, reinstalled as often as times as you need or want, but the data is invaluable, okay? So please make sure that data is being backed up. And this is certainly true when we're talking about payroll as well, okay? Okay, let's dive into payroll and let's kind of talk about, again, some of the things that we're here to look at, which is common payroll problems. All right, so I'm getting some messages here logging in. I'm going to come back to those in just a minute. But here, first one is when we go into employees, contractors here in the middle there, the right to the left of the question mark, the right of the question mark in the dashboard, opens up our employees, contractors page. It doesn't matter who it is, folks, okay? So if we go through our employees, ensure that each one of our, it doesn't matter whether they're contractors or employees, make sure that they have all of the necessary accounts populated. If you're transferring, and if you own accounting and you're transferring payroll into accounting, which you should be, okay? And typically we're going to go, here's our senior minister, Larry. We go pay hours or pay rates and hours. We're talking about like right here, Huntington Bank checking account. Let me get my highlighter again. Right here, Huntington Bank checking, right here, okay? All the employees' expense accounts here and the employer's Medicare FICA expense account. All of those should be populated. When you go to your tax tab over here, your 941 federal tax liability down here at the bottom, okay? For new employees, it's best if we go in and we set those default accounts, okay? So what I mean by that is if we close out of employees, contractors, and we go right up here to data setup, let's see, where is it here? Sorry, special functions. Right here, settings in the upper left corner, and then across to default accounting accounts. So see here, you can say, okay, I want to set, that all of my payroll is going to be paid out of a particular checking account. Okay, if I go to Employers FICA and I type FICA in there, I go church portion of FICA Medicare, and then it's selecting that same expense account each and every time, but only when I add new employees to the database. Okay, same thing for federal, state, local, or miscellaneous tax liabilities or tax accounts as well, the accounts that will be credited. Okay, so, but again, this only systematically populates it when I'm adding a new employee to the payroll database. It doesn't retroactively go in and add them for employees there. Okay, so set these accounts so it'll make it easier for you when you're adding new employees, and you can kind of basically take a lot of this out of the mix. It's particularly helpful. It can only populate so much, right? So it can choose the checking account. It can choose the employer's match for Social Security and Medicare. It can choose the state tax accounts, all the tax withheld accounts. What it won't do is it won't automatically populate the expense accounts for things like base salary, okay? That's typically the one account that you're going to have to remember to go into employees and check those boxes for that employee as you're setting them up and adding them to the database, okay? And that's what I'm talking about is this one right down here, employee expense account, senior minister salary, etc. Okay? If I go to the next employee, custodian salary, all right, that's the expense account that the software won't default to and won't automatically populate for you, okay? While we're here under employees, contractors, looking at Larry, our senior minister, we also, you want to make sure, again, folks, we're only hearing and sharing with you what we hear on support calls a lot of times. So here, what I'm talking about is if they're a minister, member of the clergy, you're going to want to check this box here called minister under the general tab, all right? All right, maybe I'm not getting any better at drawing my arrows. But if they're a minister and they're going to be stating that they have X number of dollars being allocated towards housing allowance, to have a housing allowance reporting on their W-2 at the end of the year, you got to check that box, okay? When we do that, Social Security and Medicare for the employee is not in play. Nothing reports in boxes 3, 4, 5, or 6 for either Social Security wages, Medicare wages, or nothing is withheld for Social Security and Medicare at all, all right? That is part of the requirement for the minister is they are considered self-employed. If they have anything withheld, it'll be self-employment tax, but they cannot have a housing allowance and withhold Social Security and Medicare taxes and have Social Security and Medicare wages report, okay? So make sure that that minister box is checked if they're clergy, okay, and they are having a housing allowance, okay? That's one of the most common. We get that a call all the time is user calls us. They go, oh, well, here it is March, and I've been withholding taxes or Social Security and Medicare taxes for my new minister, and now I'm being told that we shouldn't be doing that. What do we do? Well, there's challenges that come with that, right? Because you've paid in Social Security and Medicare amounts as part of the 941 tax payments you've made. There's amounts that are now reporting on. There's an employer match that you're now dealing with that you have to clean up with regards to that. So there's hoops you have to jump through to fix that when that's set up, as opposed to just simply checking the minister box when they're set up initially. The software then takes care of everything else. Sure, if the pastor wants you to withhold their self-employment tax, you're going to go over to the tax tab here, and you're going to check this box to the left, right between retirement plan and used tax tables, called Minister's SE tax. Then you're withholding their self-employment tax. It's being paid in as part of and reported on the W-2 as federal tax, but it is being withheld, but still does not show up under boxes 3, 4, 5, or 6. Okay, very important, really, really important. We hear it a lot. All right, number 3, dates on things like allowances, deductions, local taxes, miscellaneous taxes. And what I'm talking about here is under data setup. If I go across the top, to either allowances or deductions, we notice when we click on any of them, all of them have a date right up here in the upper right-hand corner. See, it says starts, so it's got the start date, and then there's got an end date for that, okay? For those that are kind of continuous and ongoing, you can enter a start date, but make sure there's no end date. We get that call all the time too. Oh, well, I had a deduction or something set up for my minister, for my employees, and it was being deducted before, and now it's suddenly not being deducted. That is, folks, really the only thing that would prevent that that's the only thing that would stop it. Now, keep in mind, there are two places where the dates can come into play. Start dates too, honestly, folks. It says dates, so it's not just about end dates, it's about start dates as well. Okay, and so the date here under the allowances, and honestly under deductions, folks, if I go to deductions, same thing, notice the screens look and work identically. So I've got start dates and end dates for deductions as well. Okay, so this is the overall control for the deductions. This is where we would basically say, okay, I'm ending that deduction for everyone who's using it in my database. I would set it here. Simply enter an end date and simply click OK, and that then ends it for everyone systematically. Okay, but you do have individual control of those dates. And so what I mean by that is if I go into, say, my employees' contractors, and if I go to Larry again and go to my deductions, we notice over here to the right, okay, let me get out my highlighter again. Right here, start date, column 1, to the right of that, end date. So you can come into this window in the employees and simply click end date, and you're just setting an end date for the deduction or the allowance or miscellaneous tax or local tax for that one single employee. You're not doing a sweeping ending of it with an end date. You're just saying, I'm removing it from this employee. Yeah, so if I click on this for, say, health insurance, I click on it, it says what date you want to end it. When I enter that date, assuming any pays checks after that, that deduction will no longer be deducted from Larry's pay. And if I need to, I can come in here and remove that from them and remove that end date if I want to pick it up again. Okay, but you've got to pay attention to those. Under our miscellaneous taxes, state taxes, or miscellaneous and local taxes, same thing. These screens, folks, function identically in terms of things like dates. And when I go in and I add a deduction to an employee, so let's say I've added myself in here today for a reason, other reasons, and we'll see that later. I come up here first. If I go in and I say, okay, here's a deduction, and I click in here and I go, okay, I want pension amount to be withheld. It pops up and says, what date do you want this to start? So it's going to default to 1/1 of 2025, which is fine because it's not going to suddenly retroactively go in and deduct it, or or deduct it from checks because I haven't been paid before this. We're just saying when do we want it to be able to be used and start to be deducted. I could change it to, June 1st or something if I want. Doesn't hurt for me to set it up as 1/1/25. It just has to be a start date that falls on or before the date of the first pay where it needs to be deducted or allowed as allowances occur. Okay, so I could certainly go in here and calculate that as of May 1st or something like that and just click OK. No end date. So anytime pay comes in that's May 1st or later, that deduction from my pension is going to come out each and every time. Okay? All right. So let me take a quick here looking at my list. All right. We're going to go probably a few minutes long here, folks. It's a topic for sure. As we talk about on virtually every year, folks, usually coming up here mid-year, so probably something coming up, we call it mid-year checkup, is under your reports and export and payroll, under tax reports, you've got the draft quarterly 941 and your draft W-2 form. Check those. Review them anytime. Now here we are, we're 5 months into the year, right? So maybe now's a good time to ensure, looking at those draft W-2 forms, to make sure that employees' pay is being set up and reported correctly. Okay, if I go to draft form W-2, I choose the year, I go to next, I can choose specific employee. So if I want to uncheck everybody and just look at, say, Larry and Jimmy and go to next, opens up a draft copy. This is not a fileable copy. It's just a copy that you can look at to see where things are reporting on their W-2s and the amounts. Check them. This is not a form you'll file. You'll only do that through tax forms, but it doesn't hurt to get a jump on that to anticipate easier to fix problems now in May or June of 2025 than it is on, January 30th of 2026. Okay, so take a look at those now. And same thing with your 941 form as well. So we go to tax reports, tax forms, same thing, it brings up the year and what quarter am I wanting to report for. So simply once I've chosen that quarter, I simply click next. It asks me virtually like the real form, this is your tax deposits for the quarter based on what I see, is this correct? So if you have made deposits, you're like a semi-weekly or monthly depositor, you can click yes on that. If you're a quarterly depositor, you can say change that to 0 and click yes. And what it impacts, folks, is how it reports down here. So notice here, if I put 0 as the amount deposited, it shows the amount or the balance that I owe or balance due. Or if I simply choose it, go to next, and I say yes on the form, it now says here's my total taxes and other deposits, but balance due now is there's nothing there. Okay, so mirrors it. There's no Schedule B on this. This is just essentially page 1 of the 941, but it does allow you to examine totals for sure. Okay. All right. Let me move on here. All right. Payroll, not transferring to accounting. This, folks, is probably the #1 thing we hear. Okay. Remember, I said I was coming back to those messages before. When I launched Payroll, I'm getting some messages coming up here. 1, pay checks waiting to print. That's #1. If I say no to that, it says payroll not transferred to accounting. So I've got 2 different problems here. I've got payroll that's been calculated that doesn't have check numbers assigned, and I've got payroll that's not been transferred to accounting. Okay? And I see this, folks, when I remote into computers all the time for users looking at them. When I open payroll, I see these messages, and they just kind of breeze right through it. I go, folks, you got to address this. You have to look at this to find out why you're getting these messages. First reason is if I've got checks waiting to print, those checks are not transferred into accounting. I cannot transfer checks, employees who are paid by check cannot transfer those into accounting until the check numbers are assigned. Okay? That's really one of the biggest problems we get. So if I click close out and payroll and go into payroll again, I can either click yes on the message here that I'm getting about, do I want to open print checks? Or if I click no and I know I can click on print checks here and choose first run checks and click OK. Either way, it's going to open up any of the paychecks that I'm seeing here, any of the checks that I'm seeing here that are waiting to transfer into account that are not printed. All right, so what gives on that here? So why did that not open the way I should? Forgive me, folks, here. Let me do something real quick. Let's click yes on that and see what comes up. Well, that's not good. All right, let's go in one more time here. I am on the 2624.1, folks. Might be having a issue here that we were unaware of, but let me try resetting my screens here real quick. And let's see if I can get back into that and have it open the way it should. First run checks. There we go. Something about screens got resized or moved. Here's my check printing for 5/28. I did a dummy paycheck today for this, all right? Notice here I've got 5/28 twice in my list. Why is that? First of all, this kind of goes back to the problem we discussed earlier about when we have an employee who's not assigned the proper checking account. So the software goes, I don't assume it's being paid or the check stock I'm printing to is coming out of Huntington Bank checking. I get this support call all the time. Well, I'm seeing the same pay date in there twice, one that says Huntington Bank checking and the other one that says not assigned. What gives? I've got an employee who doesn't have a checking account. The software doesn't presume to know which account that employee's check is going to, so it's going to put it into two separate check runs. That's essentially what it's doing here. Okay? I can try to fix that, but I mean, I have to fix it. But I'm pretty sure it's my record that I added here. So if I go to pay rates and hours, sure enough, checking account is not populated. So if I click here and I choose Huntington Bank checking and click save, okay, let's see if we go back to the print checks and see if it now brings those up under first run checks. And looky there, one check run now, all because I didn't have one employee who had a checking account populated correctly, folks. So the software's providing you with information that's going to let you know about what's going on here when we do this. But, you know, I on my support calls, I hear about it a lot. We do is I ask folks, I say, hey, you've got checks waiting here to print. And then they say, oh, well, I printed my checks for May 28th. Why is it showing up here? And here's the simple answer, folks. We go to next, we key in the starting check number for those employees. We go to next, we choose our, our check layout that we're wanting. They go to print checks. Okay, they send the checks to the printer in the upper left-hand corner. All right, and then they close out of the preview of the checks. And right here in the bottom right, it says click next to save check numbers. Let me get out my highlighter. Okay, right here below that, it says click next to save check numbers. All right, folks disregard that. And then they basically just X out of the window. So if I just click X to close out of this, I am not assigning the check number. All right, I have to go to next. And I have to make sure that the boxes here in the center labeled mark as printed are checked, folks. It's that simple. Let me get back here. I'm trying to get back to my screen, sorry. Here, right here, mark as printed. If that box is not checked, for all of my employees, the software is not assigning those check numbers properly. So I've got to check that, and it'll do it systematically. If you're printing it, it assumes it does until you tell it otherwise by unchecking one. And then we go to next. Now we go to finish. Okay? So now, though, we now have payroll that's needing to be transferred into accounting. So if we now click on transfer to accounting, here is my May 28th pay date waiting to transfer because everybody is assigned here and properly set up. Now all I have to do is click transfer. It says transfer payroll to accounting, yes. And it now sends it into there. Even if I had one account, folks, that was blank, it would pop up and say, hey, populate all accounts. Okay, so that's the thing is cannot transfer payroll into accounting for those that receive checks until those check numbers are assigned. You cannot transfer payroll into accounting if you've got even one account, debit or credit account, that's blank for one employee. All right, that's really so important here. All right, so we're kind of getting behind here, and I got a couple more things to discuss here. Folks, backup for payroll. If you're the payroll administrator, what happens when you're on vacation or you fall ill suddenly and you cannot come in and you cannot calculate the payroll? Who is your contingency? Who's your backup on that to make sure that the payroll can get calculated, posted, and transferred correctly? Okay. In the case of an emergency, you've got to find somebody who can help out with that, or can you do it? Payroll is not terribly complex. It can be, but if it's set up correctly, it can be very simple for somebody to come in and fill in for you. Okay. So again, find out. We deal with people calling in going, well, I don't know how to do payroll, but our payroll administrator, fell ill and they can't do it. And so what do we do? So just be prepared. That's all. Also, right before we wrap up here, if this is so commonly overlooked, folks, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just date this into June. So we're going to date this June 10th. All right, is on support calls, I'm setting up a new employee. Josh, help me set up my new employee. I go through the process of setting up the employee with them, and then they think user has to believe that they have to calculate a payroll, and you do in order to test it, but you don't need to post it. Okay? Don't need to get to the check itself in order to preview the pay. So if I come in here and I go, okay, I've set myself up as a new employee. I'm going to go to, I put my pay dates in, go to next. I'm going to go to specific. Here I am, Joshua W. Allen, newest employee the church has hired. Choose my name only, go to next. Right here I can check, I'm a salaried employee. Do I have any deductions? Sure enough, there's my pension deduction. I'm just examining the pay, folks. I'm posting nothing. Okay, don't have to post anything. So yes, my semi-monthly pay rate of $653.85 is correct. My deductions are right, all good. Go to next. Folks, here's where the line is drawn. All right, the Browse Payments button right here, and forgive me if I'm overstating the obvious, but this Browse Payment button right here is what you use to examine the pay and the net pay amount without posting. Okay? The posting selection screen is where the line is drawn between posting and non-posting. If I go to next, I've posted it, I have to void it. But I can just click Browse Payments here. I go, yep, here I am. Here's my pay. Here's my tax deductions. Here's my other deductions. Here's my net pay. Here's the amount that I'm reporting for taxes and gross taxable wages and Social Security amounts and Medicare and any local or miscellaneous taxes. I'm examining the pay and the net pay right here without posting anything, okay? And if I click OK through that, notice here on the bottom right, it says clicking next will post the payroll right down here. So if I just cancel out of this right now, there's nothing to void, okay? So all you do is click cancel. It says, are you sure you cancel? Boom, no harm, no foul. I've posted nothing. There's nothing to void. Okay? Finally, we're going right at 30 minutes, folks. I'm so sorry, but it's there's a lot of important stuff here. To void pays, we go up to payroll and void individual pay right up here at the very top. Or if I've got direct deposit employees I need to void, I go to direct deposit in EFT in the upper left and void EFT. Okay? And I can simply choose the name or the EFT or the pay date that I'm wanting and go to void here in the upper right. Let's go back to the void individual pay. It's different there, but easier. So if I find that I go, oh, I calculated my payroll for May 28th by mistake for an employee, I can go right down here, or I can go to my pay dates too and go right here's 5/28. Oh, I had already calculated it for the 31st. I don't need May 28th. So I have full control here. I can check the date here and it checks everybody. Or if I only want to avoid select employees, I can just choose one, here, and then just simply go to the void button to the very far right over here, right up here. There's my void button. I can't check this box. Church Windows will check the voided box for us automatically once I void that. So if I choose everybody, check them all, click void. It'll say, are you sure you want to void the selected pays? If I'm not, I would say no and choose differently. But in this case, I am. Also, if as much as it posts into accounting, it'll reverse accounting. So it says the following pays have already been transferred to accounting. Are you sure you want to reverse the accounting transactions? Of course, I want to get it out of accounting. I'm going to click yes. Okay? And so a lot of folks go, oh, well, I went into accounting and I manually reversed those payroll. No need to do that. If you just let the software do it, it'll do the work for you. So I'm going to click yes on that. Takes a few seconds. It now then will take those folks out. And the May 28th is no longer in payroll. It's no longer in accounting. All done. Okay? All right, folks, I'm going to leave. That is where we are going to leave our topic for today.